Hello, my name is Kurt, and today I'll be talking about what a Sagittarius child is like. Now I have Sun, Mars, and Mercury in Sagittarius, and as always I enjoy talking about astrology from personal experience. So for all of you out there wanting Sagittarian children, this is going to be sort of a glimpse into how it is. And you gotta be prepared because it is a pretty funny but mentally stimulating and just confusing experience, and very annoying sometimes. Now, when I was a kid, I would annoy the shit out of my parents by asking so many questions. Literally, I would ask questions the second I woke up to the second I went to sleep. And my parents weren't infuriated by the fact that I asked so many questions. They were pissed off because I asked such questions that they couldn't even answer. You know, a regular kid would ask, like, oh, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? You know, typical stuff like that. Whereas me, I would ask stuff like, why is the color blue called blue? And they would just like stare at me like they were like thinking about it or whatever. Like, what do you mean? Like, blue is blue. And I said, yeah, but why isn't it called like something like Queeblop or something? Why did somebody call it blue? Like, and why did somebody call red red? What if red was the representation for blue? So the sky would be red. You get what I mean? And blue was the representation of red. Like, why is all this like this? You know, why is it that way? And they obviously couldn't answer. And I would ask constant questions like this. Like, I would see the tea kettle, and then the tea kettle was, you know, evaporating water vapor, and I would put my hand over the tea kettle, over the top where the water was rising, and then the water would condense on my hand again. And I'm like, how does this work? Like, how does water change from sort of a liquid to a gas into water again? And this was, mind you, this was when I was like 6 years old. This was when I was like very, very young. Like I said, usually kids don't ask these type of questions. They ask like, oh, like, why is the stove hot? Or like, why does you know, like stuff like that, you know. But the questions I would ask were so philosophical, like they couldn't answer it, so they would just get so pissed off. And then I'm like, okay. Eventually they started ignoring me because they're like, okay, you know, at first they tried to answer all my questions, but then eventually, like, I would get so annoying, like constant questions and constant things. They're like, oh, I can't answer that. I'm like, why not? You know, I would ask questions. I would freaking just talk back in questions, and it was hilarious. And then I'm like, okay. So eventually they got tired of me and they started kind of ignoring me, so I had to figure out things on my own. So this is what I would do. I would go to school and I'm like, oh, you know, if they don't know, maybe my teachers will know. They're obviously smart, you know, people, because they're teaching, you know, kids all these things, right? So I'm like, oh, teacher, why is blue blue? And then he would tell me something like, oh yeah, you know, the sky is blue, blueberries are blue, you know, ocean water is blue. You see how that works? And I'm like, no, you're not understanding what I'm asking you. I said, why is the color blue called blue? And then, like, he would like just look down on me because obviously I was like a small kid, like, and he's like, how the hell could this kid like have such like questions and ideas and all this stuff? Because like the other kids would like be just like nap time and drinking milk and, like, you know, coloring stuff, and I'm here like asking all these ridiculous questions. And then obviously I would annoy the crap out of teachers too. And eventually the teachers got tired of me too, because they would be like, oh, you know, you really have to stop asking so much. Because I would ask questions right after that. I'd be like, oh, why is blue blue? They couldn't answer it. I'm like, oh, okay, you know, why is this and that? And this would go on for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and it would take up a lot of the time in the class. And then it's like the teacher would be like, oh, you really have to stop asking so many questions. I understand, blah blah, but I need to teach the class. And I'm like, okay, so you're teaching us how to spell blue, right? but you're not teaching us where the hell blue came from, you know? And then like I would get in like just so much, like it wasn't trouble, they just like thought I was so freaking annoying, like they thought I was like a smart ass, you know? And I'm like, I don't care, because I wanted to know the answer. I couldn't find anything. And then, you know, obviously I would get into religion class, and then read all this stuff about Jesus, and I'm like, oh, you know, so if Jesus resurrected, why couldn't he come back again, like it says in the Bible and all this stuff? And it's like, oh, you don't question the Bible, because in my school there were a bunch of nuns. They're like, you don't question the Bible. It's the word, it's the law, and then that's it. It's a sin if you question it or whatever. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense though, you know, like it doesn't explain all this stuff. And I would just do stuff like that. And another thing I enjoyed doing was analyzing words. Like my first language was Polish, and some of the words are pretty interesting. And you know, a normal kid doesn't really think about this type of stuff, but I did. You know, it's like there's this word, for example, dugopis, right? It means pen. But if you separate those words, if you separate dugo and piece, dugo means long, and piece means sort of like writing or to write. So I would be like I would say the word, right? I'm like, dugo piece, and I knew what each separate thing meant. So I'm like, dugo piece, wait a minute, like, because my parents just said, oh yeah, it's dugo piece, that's it, it's just a pen, whatever, you know, there's nothing to it. But then I'm like, wait a second, like, where did this come from? Where did this word come from? You know? And it was like, dugo means long, and piece means writing. So I'm like, dugo piece, long writing. You know, so a pen, and then I would think about it, I'm like, oh, okay, so a pen writes for a long time. You know, it's not like a pencil that you write for a little bit and you gotta sharpen. A pen has a lot of ink and you could write for a long time. So, oh, you know, it makes sense. So I would explain these things to myself. And then there would be other words like wiecieruchy, which means jeans, right? But here, like in the English language, like jeans are jeans. Like there's really not much to question, I guess. But in Polish, like wiecieruchy kind of means like wycierać, or means to kind of erase, to wipe out, to wear out type of thing. And ruchy means movements, like to move or something like that, right? So I'm like, okay, wiecieruchy, okay. So it's like pants that kind of wear out the more you move. You get what I mean? So I would like put these things together, and it was just so pleasant to me when I finally figured it out, because like, oh, okay, that makes sense, you know. And then there's this other word, chihobiegi, which basically means sneakers, which kind of means the same thing here in English, like sneakers, to sneak, you know, you sneak around, to move quietly, right? Well, in Polish, it's a funny, like, I liked things that sounded cool, you know, or weird, or funny in some way, or in one way or another. So I'd pick out these words. I'm like, chiho biegi, alright. Chiho means quietly, or quiet, and biegi means sort of running, or to run. So I'm like, okay, silent running, or silent runners. I'm like, okay, it makes sense, because when you run in sneakers, they don't make that much noise, as if you were to run in, like, high heels or something, or in boots, you know what I mean? So this is how I would spend my days, like, doing all this stuff. And then it's not just the philosophical nature that just, like, you know, messed with my parents. It was like I was always an adventurer. I always wanted to be outside, and every time I did go outside, I would always come back with a big ass bruise on my head, or like a freaking scraped knee or something. And then I was always clumsy, you know. I would always like just mess around and have fun, and I would injure myself in one way or another. But my adventures were crazy, you know. I would do weird stuff, like I would just pretend I was some kind of wizard or something. I would run around and like pretend that, you know, I'm going on an adventure to some kind of hidden kingdom, and then I'm like, okay, once I walk through these bushes, like this will be sort of the enemy's territory, right? And I wouldn't just walk through the bushes, I would run. And one thing I wouldn't realize is that the bushes were like, they were kind of boxwood bushes, and they were pretty big. So it was like thick branches in those bushes, so I'd run like straight into it and bam, like just smack my head, like just fall like on the ground and stuff, and I'm like, oh, whatever, it's just another challenge. And then I would interpret that into my fantasy as well. I'm like, okay, so there's these evil bushes that are guarding the way into the kingdom and stuff like this. And it's like I would just do crazy stuff. Like when I would go on a swing set, I would swing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then eventually I would get bored and I would just like try to go as fast as I could, and I would just jump off the thing in like midair, and sometimes I fell like freaking, uh, like it was just so fun. Like I was a very adventurous type of person, so not only did I have a very inquisitive nature, a very curious type of person. Like I remember in particular this one scenario. I was very young. I was probably like, I didn't even really speak yet. I think I was like probably 4. No, I don't really remember how young I was, but I was very young. Like I could walk, but not that well, and I couldn't really speak yet. So I was on my backyard and something, and I found something laying there, and I was naturally curious. So I'm like, oh wow, I used to watch a lot of cartoons and stuff, and it was something fuzzy, right? It looked sort of like a squirrel or something, right? And I picked it up by its tail, and then I started looking at it, whatever. And then I take it by its tail, and I walk up to I think it was my mom at the time. Was it my mom? It was either my mom or my dad, and I'm like, hey, look, look what I found. I found a new toy, and they're like, drop that right now. It's a rat. It's a mouse or whatever. No, it was a rat. It's like, oh, it's a rat, like it's gonna bite you and all this stuff. And then I'm like, why should I drop it? It's not harming me, it's my friend and stuff. And then my mom got a shovel and just smacked that shit. Like I had it like this, and she just smacked it out of my fucking hand. And I'm like, I was traumatized as a kid. I'm like, this is my friend, like what the hell? And then like she explained to me later that like, oh, my dad put like rat poison out in the backyard, and like those rats are not actually like, those are actually rodents, and they're not actually dead because they're kind of paralyzed by the poison, so they could wake up and they could mess with you. Plus they're filthy, they carry diseases, you shouldn't touch them. And it was hilarious. Like being a Sagittarius child is just a never-ending kind of journey. You never grow out of it either. That's the thing. Like as a parent of a Sagittarius, you have to be very, very wise. You have to know how to kind of, talk about philosophical concepts with them. Like when they ask you, why is blue blue, you gotta kind of like figure it out, or you have to kind of ask them a question back, like, oh, why do you have like 5 fingers or something like that? You know what I mean? You gotta challenge them back. And I was never challenged. I was always disappointed, so I would challenge myself. I would just just do things on my own, figure things out on my own, because nobody could freaking explain anything to me. So it was like my own little adventure. And we, like I said, we're clumsy, and then we're just... It's fun to be a parent of a Sagittarius, but like I said, you have to be prepared, like really prepared for it, because it's not easy. Like it's not like maybe like a Pisces child that you could like give a coloring book to and give cartoons or whatever, and they'll stay like lost in that dream world or that fantasy world and all that stuff, and they'll be kind of like shy and whatever. I was always shy, but that's because of my other astrological placements. So I was always reserved. I was a philosopher, but I wasn't like, I would go on my own adventures. I wouldn't like other people, like, because they would ruin that shit, Like when I would do that whole wizard thing and I would like slam into the bush, like the other kids would just laugh at me, whatever, and they would just ruin the whole thing. I'm trying to explain to them, I'm like, dude, this is a bush, like this is an evil, like enchanted bush that is guarding the way to the kingdom, and they're like, oh, this is lame, let's play something else. I'm like, screw you then, I'm gonna play by myself, And I was always a loner. But that's a good thing, because a lot of Sagittarius people are outgoing people, and they have a lot of friends, and that could get them into more trouble, Like, Sagittarius kids would be kind of the ones that, if, like, if like a baseball falls into the gutter, into the sewage drain, they would be the ones that would try to like lift the damn thing up and try to get it, you know, because they would want to continue playing with their friends, but they would also be curious as to what is actually in those things, you know, what is actually in those like drains where the water always flows, and nobody explains that to you and all this stuff, you know what I mean? So it's very tricky, you know. And another funny scenario is that my parents literally told me when I was older, they're like, we honestly thought that you would be kind of mentally retarded because you slammed your head and had so many bruises, and like you would jump from couch to couch because whenever you couldn't go outside, you were kind of impatient, and if you didn't have answers to your philosophical questions, you would just start like doing random adventure crap in the house. You would jump from couch to couch and freaking fall down and slam your head, and like one time I freaking cut my fucking head open, like, and I needed to have stitches or else I would bleed out and stuff. Like, that was a pretty crazy experience. And yeah, it was funny when they told me when I was older. They're like, yeah, we thought you would have like that's kind of messed up, you know, to tell your kid that too, you know, that they thought like, oh yeah, he's gonna end up retarded or something because he slammed his head so many times. My parents are very interesting people, but yeah, I mean, it's a very fun thing, you know. So I can't really think of anything else to add right now, but it's just Sagittarian children will be very annoying with their questions. Like, they will get so freaking annoyed. Like, for example, like, I'm a Sagittarius, so if I had Sagittarian kids, I would know. I would be like, okay, dude, like, I get you. I was there. Let's do this. I had the same questions. I can help you out here. We could adventure together. That's the beautiful thing about having sort of children that are similar signs to you. But, you know, I could also have children that are Pisces and Scorpio and stuff like that, which I'm going to get into my child plans or whatever. If I ever do have children, I would want to have a Scorpio female, Scorpio girl, and or a Pisces girl, and a Sagittarius male, or something like that. And then, you know, like I said, I would understand those aspects too, but I would understand the need for the Sagittarian's child's fantasies and adventures and stuff. I would be his adventure buddy, you know, because hell, you never grow out of it. You know, as a Sagittarius, you never kind of excuse me for a second. Hold on, I'll call you back in a second. You never grow out of it. You are a child forever. You always have this kind of childlike approach to life, always this curiosity and all this stuff. So yeah, you know, I think that's all. You know, I'm kind of busy right now, getting phone calls and stuff, so maybe I'll make a part 2. So hope you guys enjoyed. Take care.